This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha, one of the most popular channels of its kind on YouTube. And today's story is titled, Guy is Concerned His Wife is Having a Revenge Affair with His AP's Husband. Now let's get into this story, but before we do, I want to address something right up front. You're going to notice that this story isn't the typical type of story that I cover, because in this case, it's the guy who's cheating on his wife. And the reason why I wanted to cover this story is because it has a lot of good learnings in it, and also it gives you a view into the psyche of these men that are cheating with the women that are out there, today's modern women. He says, I had an affair with a woman I worked with, and now I'm concerned that my wife and her husband have something going on. I take full responsibility for what I did, but neither of us had any intentions of ending our marriages. We both love our spouses and talked about them often. Now you're going to see this guy says a lot of the same things that the women who have cheated in the stories I've covered previously say. So that proves that gender really doesn't matter in these situations. Cheaters all use the same excuses. Her husband was made aware of our affair by one of our coworkers. We're still not sure which one. After confronting her, he came to our house and told my wife. I wasn't home, but he called me after he left and threatened my life. I don't blame him, as I would have done the same if I was in his shoes. Well, you may be in his shoes very soon if what you said up front is true. The following day, his wife and I were suspended from our jobs. An investigation ensued, and a week later we were fired. My wife kicked me out the day he told her and just let me back home last week. Before returning, she made me pass 2 different STI tests and give her a full written confession of the affair. Since then, we've been staying in different rooms and she's been avoiding me. She will not speak to me unless it's something important about our kids. If I try to initiate any conversation beyond this or even have small talk, she ignores me and leaves the room. I haven't pushed things as I don't want to upset her, but I'm getting desperate. I'm truly sorry for what I've done and will do anything to prove to her that I always loved her. Now listen to what he says next. I would have never done what I did if I thought it would destroy our family. Well, what did you think it was going to do? One thing I was recently made aware of by another of my former coworkers is that my wife gave a copy of my confession to the AP's husband. This eliminated any chance they had for reconciliation, as her account of events were completely different from mine. Let me guess. They were really understated, I'm sure. She probably said, oh, it was just a one-time thing. Meanwhile, they probably were together 50 plus times. I now have tremendous guilt for breaking up their family and wish there was something I could do to help them work through it. You've done enough. Keep your mouth shut. I'm also worried that he and my wife have developed some sort of covert friendship and possibly more. I know that sounds hypocritical, but that's how I feel right now. I don't want to think about life without my wife, as losing her would do me in. I felt like doing myself in after I lost my job and was away from her for 5 weeks. So here's another one of these cheaters saying, I felt like doing myself in. I always say, hey, you got to take these kind of situations seriously, but a lot of times these are just a cry for attention. I've been really upset since this all happened. My doctor has me on 2 different prescriptions and recommended I attend counseling, which I started last week. Every day I make it a point to tell my wife how sorry I am and how much I love and value her, but she doesn't want to hear it. I think she's just biding time until she figures out what she wants to do. Let me know if you have recommendations of things I should be doing. Thank you and good night. And that's the end of his original post. And now I want to take a look at some of the comments he got, and in particular, what we're first going to look at are the questions he got from some of the people that responded. The first question was, how long did the affair last? Any guesses out there? What do you think? Was it a one-night stand? Was it a couple times, 3 times? About 10 months, he says. We were together a few times a month at most. That's the full truth, as I have no reason to hide anything now. I also want to add that I never cheated on my wife prior to this, nor did I ever cheat on any of the girlfriends I had growing up. The next question: how many children do you have, and how many does your AP and her husband have? He says, my wife and I have two daughters, ages 6 and 7, and they have a daughter who I believe is now 4. So these two cheaters got together and they both have young kids. People that do that are the lowest of the low. Next question: do the kids know what's going on? Yes, we had to talk with our girls several days after the confrontation. My wife explained I had a girlfriend and that it was wrong. She told them because of this we were going to live apart for a while. I didn't want to tell them, at least not yet, but my wife insisted. It was a very difficult conversation. Next question: in your post, you mentioned that you lost your job. Are you still unemployed? He says, no, I'm back working now for a competitor. The pay isn't as good and the work is harder, but I'm grateful to have secured a new job so quickly without having to move. Next question: does your wife work? Yes, she's a professional and had a career prior to having our children. When she did, she took time off to raise them. When they both reached school age, she went back to work for the same company she worked for previously. She's only working part-time now. Now listen to this. But she earns more than I do working a full-time job. Now this is a very important fact to learn, because what this tells me is that this woman has the more masculine role in their marriage. She's got a career, and as he explained, he's just working a job, and there's nothing wrong with that. I respect everyone no matter what position they're in. As long as somebody's working and doing a good job, they've got my total respect. But in this relationship, she's more the power individual. And that is not a normal position for a man to be in. Even though they may not express it outwardly, inside that's really eating at them. And those men are very prone to cheating. And what I surmise happened here, that was the case with this guy. He meets this woman who takes a more submissive role to him, a more feminine role, and he was attracted by that and then had the affair. Now, I'm not defending at all what he did, because I think what he did was terrible and I think what she did was terrible. But I'm just looking into this as to why would somebody have an affair in a situation like this. And now we're going to take a look at some of the comments he got back where people expressed to him how they were feeling. The first one's from a woman. She says, I was somewhat empathetic to you until you disclosed the affair lasted for 10 months. That wasn't an affair. You had a parallel relationship with another woman, and for that I could never forgive you. The only thing you can do now is to give your wife space, be the best father you can be, and see what happens. The next response is from a guy. He says, I've been the victim of cheating, so I fully empathize with your AP's husband. The fact that you both had young children and still were selfish enough to cheat tells you a lot about your character. You are both disgusting, but I think you already know that. I wish your wife and kids the best of luck, and for you, I hope you get what's coming to you. The next response is from a woman. She says, your marriage can be saved, but it's going to take a lot of work on your part and a forgiving heart from your wife. I stayed with my husband after I caught him cheating on me 7 years ago. Our son was only 2 at the time, and I didn't want him to grow up without a father, so I stayed in the marriage. We're probably 80% back to where we were before, and take things one day at a time. She says, my feelings for him are different now. I do still love him, but I don't trust him. I want to, but I can't, at least not completely. We once planned on having 4 kids, but I don't think I want any more with him, as I don't know for sure if our marriage will survive. Well, my advice to this woman is, if you want more kids and you don't want to have them with this guy, and you're only back to an 80% trust level to where you were before, just sever the relationship and move on with your lives. Why do you want to live in a situation like that? And the final response is from a guy. He says, I cheated on my wife back in 1991 after 4 years of marriage. She stayed with me for our kids, who were both babies at the time, but our relationship was never the same. While I loved her with all my heart and rededicated myself to our marriage, Deep down, she never forgave me, and her interactions with me became robotic even when we shared intimacy. As soon as our youngest made it through college, she filed for divorce. That was in 2012. I was devastated and have never fully recovered. I still have feelings of extreme guilt for what I did to my family, even though that all happened over 30 years ago. Contrary to popular belief, time doesn't heal everything. So that's a look at some of the comments that he got back, and now we're going to take a look at the updates that he provided. But before we do that, I want to remind you, if you like what you've heard so far, hit that like button. That will help get this video seen by people worldwide. Now let's take a look at those updates. The first update was 12 days later. He says, I want to start by thanking everyone for commenting. I was surprised by the number of responses. It took me over 2 hours to read them all this morning. My wife and I are still together, and our relationship has improved somewhat since my post, but something happened yesterday that is giving me doubt. As I explained in my post, after 5 weeks apart, my wife and I were back living under the same roof, but we're not talking unless it was about our kids. We also weren't eating together. That changed 2 weeks ago when I came home one night and my wife and daughters were waiting for me to join them for dinner. I saw this as a real breakthrough, as up to that point my wife had been feeding the kids before I got home, leaving me to fix my own dinner and eat by myself. We've had dinner as a family every night since. It's been wonderful and felt just like old times. Actually better because I now appreciate it more. Then last night I found out through our daughters that my wife's mother has been picking them up after school and keeping them at their house until she picks them up after work. When I questioned my wife, she confirmed this was true and advised me she started working full time 3 weeks ago. So she was working part time before. She goes back to work 3 weeks ago full time but doesn't tell her husband. I was shocked to hear this but kept my cool as I didn't want to upset her since things between us had been improving. I told her that was great, but I wish she would have discussed it with me first. She gave me a strange look and asked why. I said so we could have talked it through as a family. She told me, well, you know now, do you have any concerns? Then without pausing, she added, not that it's going to make any difference. That statement really stung. I paused for a moment and then told her, no, I didn't have any concerns and walked away. I've been bummed out about this ever since. To me, this signals she clearly doesn't value our marriage anymore and is planning for life after me. Maybe I'm overthinking things, but that's what my gut is telling me. I just wanted to share that quick update since it just happened. And that's the end of his first update. He then comes back 23 days later and gives another update. He says, the relationship with my wife is stable. We are getting along well as co-parents, but no progress has been made in terms of our personal relationship. We're still sleeping separately, and things between us there are as cold and distant as they were on the day she found out. I've been really depressed and stressed out about this, so on Sunday, I asked my wife if we could talk privately. She agreed, and I started by again telling her how sorry I was and how much I loved her. I also told her how much I appreciated that we were once again spending quality time together as a family. I then let her know the reason I wanted to speak with her. I told her I wanted her back as my wife and wanted that more than anything in the world. She didn't say anything and just let me keep talking until I ran out of things to say. Eventually, she spoke up and told me she didn't feel the same. I was deeply hurt hearing that, but I understood why she felt that way. I told her I was working hard to be a better man and gave her an update on the progress I've made in counseling. She appeared to be disinterested but listened to everything I had to say. After I gave her the update, I asked her if she would please join me at one of the sessions. She rejected the idea, stating that she had done nothing wrong and doesn't need counseling. I told her I know that, but if she would just attend one session with me, it would go a long way in my recovery. After I pleaded with her, she agreed to go, but only to one session. I was so happy to hear this that I went in to hug her, but she pushed me away. Our session is scheduled for next Thursday evening. The counselor I have is really talented and has a very calming personality. I'm hoping he can help my wife open up so we can take the next step in our healing process. I'll come back after the session to let you know how things went. And that's the end of his second update. And now he comes back with his final update. And the final update came 26 days after his last update. He says, as promised, I'm back to provide an update on my marriage. I should have known things were not going to go well when my wife insisted on driving separately. Yeah, that's a pretty good indicator. When we got there, my counselor opened the session and got us into conversation. Things were flowing and it felt very relaxed. After talking a while, my counselor asked me what one thing would I like my wife to know if there was only one thing I could tell her. I didn't hesitate and said that I love her and our girls more than anything in the world and would do anything for them, including sacrificing myself. The counselor looked to my wife and asked how she felt about what I said. She wrinkled her nose and said she felt nothing. The counselor told her that she must feel something. She said she didn't. He then asked her to pick a word to describe how she felt about what I said. She replied, empty. He asked her to clarify what she meant. She said she felt nothing because the statement was just a bunch of empty words. He then asked why she felt that way, and she snapped back saying, he was effing another woman for 10 months, okay? That's why I feel like I do. She was extremely angry, but she didn't cry. In fact, I've only seen her cry one time since all this started, and that was on the day she found out. Even then, her tears were from anger and not from sadness. See, this woman's got more masculine traits. Even when she broke down crying, he says it was because she was angry and not because she was sad. Now, in reality, it was probably a combination of both, but you get my drift here on what's going on in the dynamic of this relationship. The counselor diffused the situation and got us back into a healthy conversation, but things went downhill from there. The counselor asked my wife if she loved me. She didn't hesitate and replied, not anymore. Hearing her say that sent a shock through my body. She went further and stated she didn't even like me anymore and that it was difficult for her to be in my presence. The counselor then asked why she remained in the marriage if she felt so strongly about me. She said she did it for our daughters. He followed up and asked whether she was hopeful that her feelings toward me would ever change. She told him no, they will never change. By this time the session was up, but my counselor offered to extend it. My wife objected, saying she was done talking and got up and walked out. After she left, I spent another hour with my counselor and came to the realization that my marriage was over. When I got home, my wife was waiting for me and asked for a divorce. That was by far the worst day of my life, and I broke down. I begged her to just give us more time. She told me that more time would only delay the inevitable, and that she wanted to move on with her life. I was messed up for a week after this, and I'm now just starting to feel better. We've been getting along great since then, as I think she feels a sense of relief. I too am feeling better about divorcing as I realize that what we have now is unhealthy and will eventually impact our girls. We're working out all the financial details and custody now so we can save on legal fees. It's been a very humbling but necessary process. If everything goes to plan, our divorce should be final within the next 120 days. That's where we are now. And that's how I'm going to end things. I don't plan to update again and will be canceling this account. Before I do, I'd like to thank those of you who left comments and to everyone who's followed this post. And that's the end of his story. And I want to jump right to what I think are the morals of this story, and it's going to illustrate how I feel about this situation. The first one, emasculated men are high risk for cheating. And I said that before. If a man is not in a masculine role inside of his relationship, he's going to be looking for that externally. So it's not healthy for men to be in a submissive role to their wives, to their fiancés, or to their girlfriends. Next point. If you F around, you will eventually find out. You may get away with it for a while. You may get away with it for years, but eventually that's going to catch up with you. And it caught up with this guy in a big way, and also for his affair partner, because now they're both getting divorced, it looks like. Next point, never it where you eat. And this is very important to take to heart. If you're working for a company, you should not be getting romantically involved with any of the employees in that company. It never turns out well. or rarely, I should say, rarely turns out well and is very likely to get you into trouble. And you can see what happened to these two cheaters. They hooked up and they probably did something inappropriate using company time or resources, and they both got terminated. Next point. If you're lucky enough to find a unicorn, don't be stupid. And what I'm talking about here, if you've got a good woman, if you're one of the men out there that has gotten into a relationship, into a marriage with a truly good woman, don't screw it up. Next point. Parents who cheat are the absolute worst, especially in a situation like this where you've got young children. I mean, you're not only cheating on your wife or your husband, but you're cheating on those kids as well. And now those kids are going to grow up in a broken home and with the stigma of being children of a cheater. And the final point. Those betrayed never completely forgive and will never forget. Even if they stay together, anybody who's been cheated on, that's always going to be top of mind for them. They may not say anything about it. They may harbor all these feelings inside, but they're never going to completely forgive the person, and they're definitely never going to forget it. So those are my thoughts, and now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story? About the OP and his wife, and about his AP and her husband, and how things went down? Do you think I was too hard on this guy? Or would you have been even harder on him and his AP for being cheaters? Do you think it's possible to come back from cheating? My opinion is you can't. You can never come back. You can never fully forgive and forget. But I'd like to hear your opinion on that. So make sure you do leave a comment, like this video, and share it with your friends. And I'll talk to you on the next one.